what caused you to explore the world of lip syncing?
Well, I was a teenager, a young teenager in the 90s when this was happening. And that's when I really started to pay attention to pop culture. When I say this was happening, when the sort of like wave of scandals hit, it was just like one after another. So I always sort of cared. It was always just in my head. And then I think what inspired me to write about this, and it wasn't published till months later, but was the Mariah Carey New Year's Eve performance. Which the lip syncing thing was a minor component, but she had seemed to, during that performance, admit that she had planned to lip sync, even though she didn't. Obviously, when she started out with Emotion, she sang that. She was supposed to sing that, and she didn't. And then We Belong Together comes on, and she says, "Oh, this is the album version," and she didn't lip sync that. And I just said, well, that's really interesting that Mariah Carey basically admitted that she planned to lip sync. She didn't do it. Just because she's the kind of person, the performer that you would expect to never lip sync, even though she does. Because what you buy from her wholesale is her voice. So I thought, oh wow, like culture has come a long way from the time when this was completely taboo to having somebody on stage essentially announce that they had planned to lip sync. That was like 2016. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. Or I guess that was 2016 to 2017. So I just thought that was interesting, the sea change.
Yeah, so your article is great because you can click on different links and you can see those examples of it as you kind of walk people through the history of lip sync. And we'll make sure that your link is up on our website and on our Facebook and so on. One that I found on YouTube that I don't think you had was the Celine Dion one at the Coliseum in Vegas. Have you seen that one?
I haven't seen that one. So, I'd heard the rumors about her lip syncing, but I didn't know there was documented proof.
So this one was personally disappointing for me because I'm actually a proud Celine Dion fan. I've seen her Vegas show a few times. I'm not so proud of her right now because we just got done doing this deep dive on transgender movement, and she's come out with these gender neutral clothing for children that I think is kind of nuts.
Right.
You should see the ad for it if you haven't seen it. It's this.
I've been following that this week.
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre. But anyway, we're coming off of just doing a deep dive on transgender and gender dysphoria, and gender dysphoria from our research is not something you should be encouraging children to suffer from. So I don't know what she's thinking on that. But anyway, I found on YouTube, and you definitely got to check this out, she's singing the final song, My Heart Will Go On, the big conclusion, Titanic. She ain't dancing and running around.
Right.
And all of a sudden you hear all this feedback coming from the sound system, like really loud, ear-piercing feedback. Anybody who would hear that would naturally, normally stop singing, turn around and go, what the hell's going on? Instead, she keeps, quote unquote, singing. She doesn't put the mic down because if she were to do that, she knows that audio track is still going and it would be the dead giveaway that she's not really singing it.
Right.
The only rational explanation as to why she continues to apparently continue to sing is that to put the microphone down would have revealed that she was lip syncing on that song. And she actually was interviewed at some point around the same time of one of these scandals, maybe it was the Mariah Carey, where they asked her, about lip syncing. And she said, oh, come on, people. You can't expect performers to be going out night after night and being able to sing, every song. Be realistic, people. So she was essentially defending her practice. But for me, considering the money people are paying to see Celine Dion, who is a vocalist, just like you point out Mariah Carey, she's a vocalist. You're paying to hear the vocals. And if they're lip syncing, I'm thinking, wow, we got a major issue going on here.
Well, I mean, I think it's also, you're not just paying for the vocalist, you're paying for the perfection of the performer. So it's a matter of like, what do you want to give to people, right? I mean, I think in a lot of cases, I think if you take the example of Mariah Carey, I understand why she lip syncs, because when she showed up to the Rockefeller tree lighting ceremony in 2014 or 15, and she was out of breath and she was singing in the cold, that was a huge scandal. That was headlines, Mariah Carey can't sing anymore. She would have been better off if she lip synced, because then, that would have been a thing that people talked about on Twitter, and then it would have gone away instead of threatening her legacy. So I certainly understand why people do it. But I agree, there is a certain type of performer where it's surprising because you really are signing up to hear them sing live, as opposed to a more pop-oriented act where you're signing up for more of the performance, the immersive experience.
Well, and I think we should draw a distinction between television performances and live concerts. In my mind, there's a distinction for a couple of reasons. One, we have a history of lip syncing on TV. I'm not sure why they started that way, but American Bandstand and those type of shows, it was always lip syncing. People always kind of knew it. You would hear the song fade out at the end.
Right.
So
From what I understand, that the reason why is just because it's cheaper. It's a lot easier just to play the track instead of to mic a band, for example. So that I couldn't find like anybody specifically saying this is why we did it, but when I looked up American Bandstand and Soul Train, it was people sort of like talking around that issue. So I agree that it's written into sort of like the DNA of televised performance.
Right. And it's free television, so somebody can only complain so much about it.
Right.
But when we're talking about paying money for a concert ticket to hear somebody live, that seems to me to be a totally different story. And I think that let's talk about this New Hampshire law that passed that you referenced in your article, that they perhaps struck a nice balance. I'm not going to say it's illegal. It's just disclose it. Tell me what you know about that New Hampshire law.
So as far as I could tell, and I tried contacting many people to find out if this law had actually, if anybody had been prosecuted under this law, and it seems that they haven't, but the law, which originated in the early 90s around the time of a bunch of similar laws in states or similar bills in states, so-called Milli Vanilli bills, was that a concert promoter could be fined if he or she was found promoting a show that he or she knew about would be lip-synced the entire time, and did not disclose that ahead of time. So there's a lot of conditions in there, right? You could see why that would be hard to prosecute. The first being it's hard to tell what somebody would know. The second being it's very rare that somebody lip syncs an entire show. A lot of people do it here and there. They'll do a song. They'll even, in the case of Mariah Carey, just based on my own observations, do a line or so. She does like a very tasteful sort of lip syncing at this point. It's very rare that you'd find an entire concert, except in the case of Britney Spears, who pretty credible reporting would suggest has lip synced whole shows. So it was an attempt to make lip syncing, make the lack of disclosure of a lip syncing a certain crime.
Yeah.
Because in the late 80s and early 90s, it was kind of a new phenomenon that a bunch of acts were lip syncing at their shows, people like Madonna and Janet Jackson.
So the couple problems with that law is that for whatever reason, it said the entire show's lip sync. Right. So that got watered down big time. And then number two, the fines really aren't that substantial. I think it's $10,000 if you're a company, $1,000 if you're an individual. So Mariah pays $1,000 and the promoter pays $10 and you're off the hook.
The promoter, ticket agent, and venue could face steep fines. So I don't think the artist at all was implicated. I think it depends on whether the promoter is a company or an individual. Basically, I think that is, and it was $1,000 for an individual or $20,000 for companies. So it's not like a huge loss given the scale of these things. But
so it seems to me we just gotta get one other state that would pass a law like that, but pass it with the proper teeth to it. Because think about it this way: they're going to tour around the U.S. If they're going to play in the particular state that has that law, we're all going to know that they're lip syncing, right? Because in that state, either they're going to be willing to pay the fine, but the fine should be high enough that they are not willing to pay it. So instead, they're going to have to put a disclosure on the ticket that portions of this show are pre-recorded or portions of these vocals are pre-recorded. So as long as it's in one state that has a venue that people have to play at. So if we're talking Florida, New York, California, Illinois, a handful of states, if any one of those states were to pass this, everybody would be smoked out.
Right. But from what I could tell, like nobody has actually followed this. Ticketmaster really didn't seem to have any idea what I was talking about when I asked them. I reached out to various arenas in New Hampshire. So it just seems kind of like a dead law that was passed. And then, but also I can't imagine this being actually a thing in any other state because people just don't care that much anymore.
Well, I don't know if people care or not. I mean, it hasn't been in the news because we haven't had some front page issue regarding it. But, when I talk to people, I would say 4 out of 5 people care. I get 1 out of 5 that kind of says, come on, Jim, everybody knows that it's going on. And, I'd rather hear, them sound better anyway than, hear the real vocal. But most people I talk to who are avid concert goers, as I am, no. They'd be very upset to know that the performance is being lip synced. They are paying money to see that person sing live, regardless of how well they're singing.
Well, but the thing is that this has become more and more of the used practice over time. So it didn't like hurt a lot of careers that were affected by it. Even Janet Jackson, whose Rhythm Nation 1814 tour was about the first time that people really started talking about it in the mainstream. I mean, Janet Jackson went on to phenomenal success after that. So I think like some people, I guess it matters to some people, but to what degree isn't quite enough, I think, to cause the sensation it once did. I mean, somebody will go, again, differentiating between, concert, live concert and TV. But you see the way that it plays out on TV today on Twitter, and like at an award show, some people, Mariah Carey, another example, when she played at the American Music Awards, I think it was the American Music Awards most recently, or the Billboard Awards, whatever most recent show there was. She lip synced. People talked about it on Twitter, and then that was that.
Yeah. Some of the shows have called out apparently a requirement that you sing live. I believe the Grammys right now are requiring live singing. I just watched this. Go ahead.
I think the Grammys used to be that, but certainly the Grammys have been host to lip syncing. The Chris Brown performance a few years ago of one of Chris Brown's forgettable dance tracks was clearly lip synced. I mean, it was just the album version you could hear, and the Grammys let that happen.
Yeah. Well, maybe it was in response to that, because I thought that they've got that rule in place now. Maybe not. Then the CMAs I just watched this week, they appeared to be live performances, but, there was the Garth Brooks lip sync last year. Are you familiar with that?
No.
So last year, Garth Brooks wins performer or entertainer of the year. The point of the award is the guy who had the best live shows, the best live performer. Uh-huh. And here he gets on the night he wins that award, and he lip syncs on the CMAs. And my guy who I love, Eric Church, who's known for being an incredible live performer and like literally puts on 4-hour shows, he calls him out. He calls out Garth Brooks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he called him out for lip syncing. And Garth said, hey, I just performed the 2 prior nights, and I was performing again the next night. I just had to protect my voice. And Church is kind of like, BS, dude. I'm going 4 hours a night every other night, and I'm singing every note live.
Wow.
So, and that's kind of another point, is that, frankly, when we talk about who's concerned about this, some of the major concern comes from musicians themselves, musicians that are purists. And they're like, hey, we're going out there, we're doing it, and we don't like these fakers out there because it calls into question what we're doing. If I'm going out and busting my ass every night, giving a 3-hour performance, I don't want people in the audience questioning whether or not I'm singing live or not. But right now, people are.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that the untangling sort of the authenticity from pop music has always been an active process for the audience. So, I mean, does what one artist does have to do with any others? I don't know. I mean, that seems a little bit overly sensitive to me. There's artifice all over the place. You take music and you package it, and automatically it becomes a product as much as it is, or more than it is, art. So I think you can make a lot of, sort of arguments for and against. But
bottom line, look, not everybody agrees on this, but if you have as little as half of the people at the concert who care, that to me is enough to say that it should be disclosed so those people can make their own decision. And I just don't see what is the downside of requiring a simple statement on the back of a ticket or the front of the ticket or whatever that requires them to say that portions are pre-recorded.
Well, I mean, I think to your point, it is a little bit silly that it's taboo at this point, that like people, don't talk about it, or that when Elton John called out Madonna, I think in the early 2000s for lip syncing, her publicist, Liz Rosenberg, issued a statement that said Madonna never lip syncs. She sings every, I think it was the Reinvention tour she was on. She sings every note of this tour, which wasn't true. I mean, the Vogue that she usually up until 1 or 2 tours ago, she would always lip sync Vogue. Because it's hard. It's like a weird, sharp song. It's just a hard song to sing. Also, it's an incredibly ornate dance number whenever she performs it. And you could hear, I mean, I went through and I listened to a bunch of different cities' versions of Vogues, and the same vocal inflection. You can tell when you're hearing a track, even if the track is different than the album version. Your ear trains to it. So it is quite strange that people aren't more straightforward about this when it is common practice. So
well, and they're bordering on committing a fraud then. I mean, arguably, they're committing a fraud by standing up there with a microphone to their mouth pretending to sing. Arguably, that is inherently fraudulent. But then when you're flat out saying, by the way, I'm not lip syncing,
right,
I'm singing 100% live, and that's not true, now you're talking about potential court action. Did you be able to see much in the way of court actions?
No, not really. I mean, I don't even think Milli Vanilli risked that at the time. I guess the most. So Martha Wash was probably the most successful, and I don't even think that went to court. Martha Wash is like a classic disco singer. Was part of the Weather Girls, sang with the iconic drag queen Sylvester. And so then in the late 90s, this is 10 years after she had sort of made her mark, she has this totally singular soprano voice. If you've heard Martha Wash, you know Martha Wash. This Italian dance act, Black Box, records an entire record with Martha Wash and gives her absolutely no credit. They have a model, a French skinny model. I should mention that Martha Wash is large and older, and just sort of like not even in the late 80s, which were a lot more forgiving in terms of what we accept from our pop stars image wise. She just didn't fit the mold that they were looking for. So she did file a lawsuit, and then CNC Music Factory did a very similar thing to her. So she was able to file a lawsuit, and then RCA, which had signed Black Box, ended up giving her a record deal, so she was able to release her own solo records. I think that's, and I guess like there was also Milli Vanilli fans who bought the CD were allowed to send their CDs back and get something of a refund, like $3. But I don't think that there's been actual, like, I not in my research did I ever find any really large-scale court cases.
Yeah, well, I've done
something people complain about.
I've done some research myself on it, and yes, it was a class action against Milli Vanilli, but the award was minimal. It was like $1 if you bought a CD, and it was a couple bucks if you had gone to the concert. Now that adds up to a lot of total dollars, so it's good for the lawyers. But as far as the people, it really meant little. And then I've spoken to some lawyers about the possibility of, could there be a class action lawsuit against, say, a Justin Bieber, who seemed to be busted pretty red-handedly in India, lip syncing, as well as I'm sure the U.S. And, they thought that it's probably a pretty strong case. They were very concerned, though, about, hey, if this is so well known, one argument the performer may make is that people already know this. It is so much in the news about lip syncing and so on. So you have to prove that people really were defrauded out of their money, that they went to it expecting live singing. Well, if you've got all kinds of news articles about Mariah Carey or Madonna or Justin Bieber lip syncing, well, arguably people were already on notice when they went. I don't particularly buy that argument, because I think that may only apply to a portion of the audience, but they were concerned about that. And then they were also concerned about bottom line proving it. They were saying, hey, you got to have somebody on the soundboard that will testify.
Right. I mean, like, I can go to a show and I can write and be reasonably certain that what I've heard was lip syncing, but when it push comes to shove, I don't actually have the proof. Like, perhaps this person is recreating note for note what their album sounds like. They're not, but perhaps that's possible. So yeah, it's all based on hunches. But I would argue in the case of Justin Bieber that if you look at his audience, which is mostly young people, I mean, they've grown up, they were born after this wave of lip syncing scandals in the early 90s. They're used to it. It's only gotten more normalized over the years, and I think that they probably care less and less, than we did. It's just not shocking, because it's been in the atmosphere the entire time.
Yeah, well, I'd love to do a poll on it. It'd be interesting to see a poll on that. But yeah, the other issue you may have is that, do Justin Bieber fans want to sue the guy they love? Do they want to sue?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, especially the way that celebrities are worshipped today, just being in that room with them is enough. It doesn't really matter. And if you take the case with the New Kids on the Block who were part of this, a lot of accusations, they had stopped their tour in about 92 or 93 to go fly across the world. They were in Australia to appear on Arsenio Hall to refute these rumors that they had been lip syncing, but their fans were unwavering. I mean, throughout all of this has been happening for years and years and years. I mean, there's a Boston Globe article. It's crazy to read it. Donnie Wahlberg flatly denies that he ever lip syncs. And then in a parenthetical, in the next paragraph, it's like his manager admits that sometimes they do lip sync, during dance intensive numbers. No, but I mean, they didn't lose fans over that. So I think like when you get to the hero worship thing, it's a very odd sort of formula of what people are willing to accept and not, but there is some degree of like you need to do what you need to do to be you, so we will forgive you for that.
Yeah.
It's very
I love Lady Gaga and Celine Dion, and I'm having a tough time ending my love affair with with them,
yeah.
despite them getting busted. Let me ask you this: what do you know about the technology behind it?
Not very much. I didn't. If I were to write something longer, and this was very long, I mean, I basically just did my piece as a research project, looking at sort of like the scandals and the way it had been reported. But I think that there's definite work to do in terms of talking to sound engineers and how it actually works. I don't know. I saw Mariah many times in Vegas this summer, and it seemed to me like she was able to kind of switch into singing a line on the fly. That's how I have no proof of this at all, but it seemed like sometimes she would go for a note and then and wouldn't quite get there, but immediately it would come in. So it's
Right.
somebody like listening hard, or she has a button or something. I don't know, because given the way that she does lip sync, in my perception, which is one line here, a flourish there, it would be really hard, I think, to remember that. Like, okay, these are the three lines I sing, and now here's the one line I don't sing. This is her job. Perhaps she does do that, but it also seems like maybe there is some degree of being able to kind of lip sync when you need it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think you're right. That's why I did want to. We are going to try and dig into the technology behind it.
Yeah.
What my understanding is, but I want to confirm this, is that you could have a backing vocal track, but you can still sing over that backing vocal track. And if you sing over it, your voice is going to defeat the backing track. So that's how she's able to very easily slip in and out of it.
Yes, yeah, and there's definitely a lot of that sort of, and you can tell when somebody's got a backing track too. I mean, you'll just hear a lot of voices, so you certainly hear quite a bit of that.
But you could have a backing background vocal track, or you could have a backing lead vocal track.
Right.
So right, and so I'm saying that I think Mariah Carey probably has a backing lead vocal track, and she can choose to lip sync the entire concert, or she can sing as much or as little as she wants.
Right.
And when she sings, you're going to hear her. When she's not singing, you're going to hear the backing track.
Yes.
And you'll hear that live mic, and they'll shout out. I saw J-Lo in Vegas recently.
Oh yeah,
she's giving a lot of "Come on, everybody, come on, come
right.
on." So that part's live, but the actual singing is not.
How much of that show did she lip sync, would you say?
I probably 3/4 of it would have been my guess. Now she's going to come up with the excuse that, there's all this dancing. You can't expect me singing with all this dancing. And my attitude is, well, then during the singing parts, don't dance. Dance in between the singing parts. You could have extended portions where you do your dancing and then go back to the singing. Or what I also like is backup singers. I've got no problem with backup singers to help support your voice, to have major backup singers. As long as they're up there singing live, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, Mariah does a lot of that too. I mean, the chorus will come in, the choir, the handful of backing vocals she has in to help her with heavy lifting on some of the really tough notes. You'll hear that. But Jenifer Lopez, I would just expect to go see a show for lip syncing. I mean, that seems to me like basic theater.
Yeah.
I mean, and it seems to me too that nobody's really seeing J-Lo just to hear her sing, in fact, that might be hard to sit through an entirely live J-Lo performance. What's amazing to me is you go back and you watch some old Madonna performances, even if you watch Truth or Dare, and she's singing "Oh Father" and "Live to Tell," and it's just this is a case for lip syncing. She can sound brutal after a certain point. She's gotten better with her control, but there are people that I'd really rather hear lip sync
Well,
than sing
or
live.
give her some backup singers. How expensive could these backup singers be? I mean, look at all these talent
Yeah.
shows we have out there with all these great singers. Throw three of them on stage behind them, and you'll be fine.
She had two backup singers though on that tour. I think she maybe needed like two
Well, turn
more.
down her mic a little bit and turn up the mic of the backup singers.
Yeah.
What about this one? I'm concerned. I go to a lot of musicals, and what about Broadway? I mean,
Yeah.
they're wearing just a little piece here in front of their face, so that they can move around and so on. Those are supposed to be live music orchestras in front and live singing, but I wonder, can we trust those?
I think so. I think there'd be more of an outrage with Broadway just because of expectations. I mean I don't know much about Broadway, what goes on, but I did right after the publishing of this piece. I did a serious show that included like a Broadway expert, and from what I recall, the hardline was like, this is not something that happens on Broadway. And in fact, because this doesn't happen on Broadway, it shouldn't be happening on stage. That seemed to be her position in any context, that like it's a matter of technique and stuff. And and that's a good case, I think, for not lip syncing, because that is also singing and dancing the entire time and acting. It's a way to completely wear yourself out, and yet it doesn't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, because I was just I saw Bronx Tale the other night, which is only okay, by the way, for listeners. But yeah, there they are singing and dancing away. I'm like, okay, what is all this argument that you can't sing and dance? These guys are singing and dancing their asses off.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But I also think the training is different. I don't know. I think like a lot of people sort of get thrust into being a pop star in a certain way, and they just have to learn from there. I mean, Madonna's a really good example of somebody who actually like went back and learned how to sing, for Evita, and she held on to a lot of that technique, and she does sound today better, a lot better in concert than she did, the first few tours that she did.
Well, anyway, that's good to hear. If Broadway feels that it would be an absolute faux pas to not sing live, that the expectation is you're going to see a live performance and everybody's performing and singing live, I would just say, I think that same standard should apply to concerts.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I take a little bit more of an agnostic point of view, just because I've, grown up watching this happen. And, I just think that there are more elements to pop music than just the voice, the spectacle too. And also, I know that celebrities have a charmed life, and that they get a lot, and that their jobs, relative to like a lot of jobs, are very easy, but they're also very hard. So it's tough when you're in the public eye and people have these expectations of you. And what are you going to do? Are you going to give them your humanity, or are you going to give them the perfection that they expect? I understand deferring to the latter, as much as it's nice to see the former, as much as it's nice to hear. I mean, like, clearly Mariah Carey's voice has changed a lot, right? And I think that part of her problem is that she set herself up to fail as her voice changed. But if you go through the catalog of Joni Mitchell sequentially, you hear her voice drop throughout the years. And I think there's something really beautiful in that. I think there's something beautiful in the fact that the last Whitney Houston album, her voice was in tatters, because there was something really soulful. Her voice, her life was really tattooed on her voice in a way that's somewhat socially unacceptable, and yet to me very moving. So yeah, I mean, I think it's fine for people to be human, but I understand that the pressures of fame make them feel like they can't.